Hello. Real quick, the title is because of this video is because I want people that are searching for that specific term to see the video because I want to make this for those people and everyone else that stumbles across this. The most succinct way I could describe socializing with most people is like going back to high school, knowing whatever you know now. Let me explain that. So when I was a young kid, I was very much not normal. I was unable to fit in. I also didn't care about fitting in. I usually had one or two closer friends, actually mostly girls, and felt kind of isolated from everyone else. I guess as a kid, the thought that sometimes popped in my head was, look at how dumb these other kids are. How could you not know that? Honestly, now my elementary school days are pretty hazy. The finer details are lost to time. My memories are wanting a best friend, wanting a sibling as well, eventually wanting some normalcy, but not having any clue what all that actually entailed and what the value of that actually was. I guess I bored on being a loner, but I never really felt lonely. Like I said, I usually had a couple closer friends, but nothing more than that. Looking back, I was an outsider in elementary school, but I didn't feel like a bad thing. I really wasn't struggling at all because I didn't know what the value was of fitting in. So then at age 9, I was pulled out of the public schools and homeschooled. And my dad, who's a teacher, he was always worried about my development while I was doing that. But my mom worked hard to still give me some social activities, like different co-ops, meetup groups, some other things. And I actually felt a lot more social during that time. I felt like I was starting to develop the skills of connecting with whoever I ran into. So that actually was a positive. That felt like a positive transformation for my social life. But anyway, on to high school, where my social life mostly revolved around sports, as I ran cross country and track and also did bowling in the winter. So there I got more tastes of fitting in. When I was in high school, like many others, I was pretty attention seeking. Now, sometimes it was more neutral, like the consequences of it. Other times it was negative. Because with sports teams, if you're good enough, you get plenty of attention. So bowling was never really an issue for me there. I was number one on the team my last 3 years of high school and was the captain. So it just like gives you excuses to talk to everyone, and you're way more connected to everyone else, and people are always talking to you, and just more of the social scene runs through you. Although with that, we only practiced a couple times a week. But cross country was kind of the same way for a little while as well. I had a decent stretch of time, and that was a 5 day a week thing for the most part. So that kind of so the ability I had, the sporting ability, kind of helped with that a little bit, I suppose. Um, anyway, so nowadays the best way to describe it, I guess, my social life would be just being in a little bit of a bubble. And I guess one of the things I get hung up on is maybe we're all in a bubble. Maybe some of the things I'll share are more of a shared experience than I think. Yeah, it's just not something people talk about or even realize. And like when I'm in groups, there's often times where everyone will feel the same way, but everyone just kind of leaves certain things unsaid because they think they're the only one that thinks a certain way. And oftentimes that's not the case. So a lot of this stuff I don't know because not that many people really talk about it, but just because people aren't talking about something doesn't mean they don't feel a certain way. They don't feel the same way I do. But anyway, it often does seem like two people can just talk at each other and they both come away feeling fulfilled with the conversation. Like you just happen to have enough of your interests lined up for a brief moment, and that's all people look for. Or even further, many people just yap for a bit, and if they have an audience or even think they have an audience, that's all that really matters to them. So I don't really have super close friends or anyone I'd say understands me well at the moment. Close friends, sure, but I've never really had a best friend. I don't anticipate that changing anytime soon outside of if or when I get married or I guess hopefully engaged, hopefully best friend sometime before being engaged to someone. But like as far as like weddings are concerned, I don't expect to be the best man at anyone's wedding, which I guess a lot of people probably fall into that category. There's plenty of, I guess, wedding parties I could see myself being in for a few of my friends, but nothing beyond that. I mean, honestly, maybe if I had a son, I could see myself being a best man. I think that's more likely than anything else, but we'll see, and I'll make sure to keep everyone here posted on that. But that's okay with me because I'm used to the state I'm currently in. At the same time, it's hard to pinpoint, I guess, whether or not I'm lonely when some of this is all I've ever known. But I don't think I am, at least not very much, though. But I feel like I can come off pretty normally to most others. I guess you could say it's through masking. Like I usually default to being a likable, albeit somewhat socially awkward guy. My friends typically think I'm funny, maybe a little eccentric at times as well. But it depends on how much of that side I show or what I want to do. So I feel like I'm someone that acts differently depending on the group I'm in to a decent extent. Some people are the same person no matter what. Some people really mix it up. But, I feel like I could get in the weeds with really determining what other people think of me. Do people even really think of me much to begin with? Like, there aren't a ton of people in my circle where I really sit down and ponder what they bring to the table and what makes them them. Like, I don't think about that. So something I've pondered more, I guess, is whether it's beneficial to be more open about intelligence. And when I think about it, it seems weird to have intelligence be something where people tend to have a similar incorrect view of me. And on the surface, correcting that doesn't seem to cause much trouble. Like I'm fine with my friends knowing like how good I am at bowling, what I weigh, how tall I am, like how the relationship with my parents is, like lots of other stuff. So why not give them an accurate perception of my intelligence? And I know at least for some people, it definitely does fly under the radar. Like one of my close friends from college that I roomed with, so the guy's talked to me a ton, made an offhand comment implying he and I were at the same level of intelligence, and one of our other roommates was on a higher level. He was just like, "Oh yeah, we're just not like that," something like that. And I don't believe that's the case. Like the other roommate, he would say I'm more intelligent than him. I think at least like I don't know, general intelligence, technical intelligence, whatever. You get my point. So sure, I guess some would suspect that I'm smart, but I am not always aware of it. It's not like people are asking me what my IQ is. Now, as far as I can think of another sensitive topic to people, which is money. But again, like if I won the lottery tomorrow, I have a social circle I regularly hung out with that would know exactly where I was at or close to it. Like I don't really have that right now in terms of people knowing my intelligence. So, as a kid, I was diagnosed with autism on at least one occasion, possibly more. I don't really identify it, and I have no idea whether I have it. It's like I fit some characteristics well and others poorly. That being said, I feel like a lot of my social skills have been learned and tweaked. They're not necessarily natural. They may become more natural over time, and I can eventually autopilot. So again, it just feels like it's been a more mechanical process for me than for others, and I'm not naturally in sync with others. I've had to make a lot of adjustments to get into their world. I think there's enough self-awareness, awareness when I'm talking a lot, awareness of other people's emotions and when things are going awry, skill in being liked and navigating different groups of people. That's all fairly intact. Like it appears that people want to be around me. And I can usually tell when someone's losing interest in talking to me, and I can certainly read people's body language to get a sense of when it's happening in the interactions of other people. For me, I guess for better and for worse, the power of manipulation I have seems high. I guess some of the details and the longer discussion on that will be saved for my dating and romantic relationships video. But I sometimes find myself in trouble for a lack of filter and impulse control. It's like in certain environments, if I let loose and act natural, I end up crossing the line. So I guess specifically with crossing the line, it would be blunt statements and like jokes that are directed at people that crossing the boundaries, I guess, of what they consider to be an appropriate joke directed at them. It's not like I'm making like statements that are just offensive, like, you know, sexist or racist things or whatever. I would say it's just jokes directed at people that go too far. But anyway, I feel like I've developed a good ability to kind of wiggle my way out of trouble. You know, you take as much responsibility as possible without overdoing it. You don't offer excuses, that sort of thing. So I suppose I could go ahead and ask some of my friends what makes me me and then report back on the results. That may be fun. Maybe I'll do that after posting this and get back and make a whole nother video about that depending on the results. I think I'm decently self-aware though, especially when I focus on it, but it's tough. I don't know if everyone realizes how hard it is. Like, there's not much benchmark to compare myself to. I can look at my bank account, height, weight, mile time, bench PR. Some of those I do a little bit better than others, and I can figure out then where I measure up to everyone else. But is there a good way to figure out how funny I am? Not really. Like, I get complimented on it some. I can make people laugh, but how much does the average person get complimented on humor or make other people laugh? I don't really know. How many times is the average person in a conversation where they're told they're a good listener, they get someone to overshare with them? I don't have a clear idea. And figuring out all of that would be hard, and it's not something most people really do. So lately I've done some reflecting on the, I would say, like, common man shtick I've often used to fit in and be relatable and likable. I mean, those are important things. What's the common man shtick, you might ask? I would say some celebrities have it, and I might emulate that a little bit, where you are not like other people, but you're still able to find a way to relate to other people well by you try to talk about the same issues that they care about. Like, I mean, like Donald Trump is able to kind of do that and pull a number on a lot of people by doing that, even though he's not a common person. A lot of politicians are not common people with common backgrounds, yet they're able to do that and to increase their relatability, likability. So I guess, like, when I was running cross country, it would be like I was working hard, but I wouldn't show that I was working as hard as I did. I guess I would pretend like I was maybe slacking more than I actually slacked, and try to have kind of a laid back attitude about things. And it's like, if someone that was maybe 5 minutes slower than me was complaining about a workout, you know, I'd also complain about that. So then they're thinking, oh, we have something in common. Like, that stuff works. That stuff works on a lot of people, I would say. But anyway, it does need to be turned off in certain situations, like job interviews, probably some job interviews, dates. But yeah, like socializing, again, I think it's pretty easy when you're good at a lot of different things and kind of with an aw shucks attitude about it. Now, but you have to be careful with that, because you don't want to go too far the other way, where you're too far down that road where then you're just totally insufferable. I guess where you're downplaying everything, but people sense that there's a lot of ego underneath. You kind of have to hide the ego a little bit, which can be hard to do, because a lot of people, I think, will look for egos in other people when they're not necessarily there. And it's like, you want to have some ego about certain things. Just a lot of people think of it as only a good thing or only a bad thing. Like, there's a right amount of ego for everything. Like, you want to, like, there are people, I don't know, like driving, right? Like, I'm not the best driver in the world, and it'd be stupid, I think, if I acted like I was the best driver in the world. At the same time, if I never drove, because I had an ego that I was like the worst driver in the world, and like, I think driving is a good thing. That's just something off the top of my head. I'm trying to get a little bit more unscripted for some of these instead of just reading off the iPad. So I guess another thing I ponder now is finding a balance between adjusting my environment to fit me or trying to be well-rounded and adapt to any environment. Like the attention-seeking thing, that really hasn't gone away. But any one-on-one interactions, or if I'm like maybe someday in the future the leader of something, whether maybe I make it up to management and a job, I'm the leader of a social group, or maybe coaching a team, that would all take care of the issue. And in those spots, I could be the center of attention and talk to everyone freely and build a lot of relationships with one-on-one conversations. Or I could just stick to one-on-one conversations, interactions, and get my attention fixed that way. But like where I struggle, I'd say right now is in like a larger group where I have like no leadership position, like whether it's a formal leadership position or like an informal leader in like a social dynamic or like a social hierarchy. Now, sure, I have the ability of observing and paying attention to others, and that can make things interesting, but it's rare that I end up feeling like I really get much out of this. And I've tried this with different groups and various activities, and that's the way it's been so far. So I really like some one-on-one conversations being thrown into group activities. And that's where you really have to be careful. Like you never know the number of people that it works out well for groups. It just depends on the group, because you don't want something where you maybe have like 6 people where there's one conversation going on. If you make a group big enough, you go to a party with 50 people, you can have side conversations with everyone and spend the whole time or most of the time in one-on-one interactions, and that can be great. You go to a group with like 5 people, yeah, you're not doing that for the most part. But some groups will get in, like, you have a group of 10 where everyone's in one conversation, you can't find the side conversations, and there's also groups of like 10 where everyone is split up. It just depends on the people or the vibe, I guess. So, I guess with one significant downside in my social life is not meeting that many people like me and not having too many good environments to do so. Like, I didn't go to a very exclusive college. My job isn't very exclusive either. Like, if you want to find very high concentrations of people with high intelligence, you typically need something that directly screens, like Mensa, or maybe a network through an elite university or an exclusive job. The social circles that you get are largely tied to one of those things. Like everything's tied to the university, everything's tied to work, so it's not necessarily going to be just like a laid-back environment. So I've really enjoyed getting to reflect on making this video and writing down a lot of my thoughts. And I do really wonder how many people would have a similar assessment of their social life or share a lot of the same feelings I do if they sat down and thought about it. Like, for example, a lot of people have interactions where they just talk past the other person and never give them proper consideration. Essentially, like a conversation with no active listening. Like, this happens a lot. So, let's say someone's evolved in one of these, like, low empathy, no active listening interactions. Now, their emotions in reaction to that conversation will fall into, I would say, one of 3 buckets. Bucket 1 being where they still got everything they were looking for out of the conversation and consider it good. Like if the other party was actively listening, it wouldn't make a difference in their enjoyment at all. Alright, and then bucket 2 is the person doesn't get everything they're looking for out of the conversation and walks away feeling worse than they would have with an active listener. So in this case, the absence of an active listener made a difference, but the person remains ignorant to the fact. Like they never quite reflect on it. They perceive it as an interaction. They're just left not really feeling full. The best way I could put it is like maybe eating a low-calorie dessert and not realizing it was low-calorie. So then bucket 3 is having this crummy interaction and then fully realizing why it was crummy. And these kind of maybe similar buckets where there's a spectrum of how people relate, I could give examples to that for all sorts of social interactions, but like I have no idea what percentage of people fall into which bucket on any given interaction or any given style. But anyway, I tend to suspect that a lot of conformity in groups and society is an illusion where people feel like everyone else fits in, but they themselves don't feel like they fit in. Some of that's an illusion, I don't know how much though. But I guess another point is that you have some people that really pick up on everything socially and are quite aware of everyone's relationship with the world. And that's seemingly very rare. Can I confirm that that's rare? Probably not. Then you have people like me that are semi-aware and maybe scratching the surface of how we all interact with each other, but I have like great uncertainty about how it actually works. And you have people, maybe the majority, that never seem to think about this stuff. They don't think this stuff through. I think like a lot of people don't even think for themselves, but that's a different topic. But they may be different and know it, but they don't ponder it, or they just consider themselves normal. So the social skills, they do fascinate me a lot nowadays. They're tough to build at times, so many variables. Like it's easy enough for me to memorize something or understand a puzzle with clearly defined rules and boundaries. There's not always a well-defined way though to really grow and get more in tune with what's going on. I try to look out for whenever I'm surprised by something, like when I'm caught off guard, I take note and try to adjust my bearings for the future. Something I will say though is I think I have a couple of big advantages here. I can learn and adjust quicker than others, and eventually the learning seems to become exponential. For example, I'm pretty good, I would say, at getting people to open up to me and getting long conversations out of them where they're vulnerable. At least I think I am. Well, these long conversations then give me more information to work with, like what led them to opening up, what all did they tell me about themselves, and then combine that with a strong memory, allowing me to kind of pinpoint positive reactions from conversations long ago that were likely forgotten about others, and I can like certainly get around. The weak spot for me is charisma. Like based on everything else about me, I think it would be huge if I get my charisma up to like a 7 or an 8 out of 10. I suppose it would probably be like a worthwhile thing to pursue a little bit more. I haven't quite figured it out. Like it's something where I haven't broken through that much. And it's otherwise a lot harder, I feel like, without charisma to build this environment that works for me, that does really well for me. But maybe what holds me back a little bit is liking the challenge of having to build around mediocre charisma. I don't know. I do know I can't stand a boring social life, but at the same time, maybe if everything just came easy to me, then it's not fun anymore, right? Like you want a challenge and some next thing to be thinking about or working on. But if this is a bad thing, I do like having some drama going on to watch from a safe distance. Obviously a bad quality. I spent time too close to the fire. But I guess with this charisma thing, I guess one struggle is I don't have a role model that seems very similar. Like I don't know people that have been in my shoes, similar life experience with whatever, mediocre charisma, and then just turned it around. But again, it seems like a worthy thing to pursue. So, like I've said, I just don't get mentally stimulated all that often socially. Now, I love chillaxing with people and just having fun, don't get me wrong. I'm not someone that thinks that all social interaction should be stimulating by any stretch of the imagination. But that preference again goes back to why I favor one-on-one interactions. And with groups, I've tried to have good times where I find stimulation in other ways. Nothing that's really stuck though. It's not like I'm never stimulated, but the good conversations feel fleeting, and I remember them for a while. How fleeting? Maybe as far as in-person interactions, like 15 or 30 minutes a month, give or take. And then I have some friends that don't live near me right now that I'll call and get good interactions with them. As far as like a need for mental stimulation, I'm going to compare it to exercise, okay? Like physical exercise. I don't want to, I've never ran for 8 hours in a day. I would never want to do that regularly. Could I do it once? Maybe. Do I like having consistent physical exercise? Yes. What amount does that actually comprise in my day? Not a huge amount. As far as mentally stimulated conversation, stuff like that, I don't want it to be a huge part of my day, but I want it to be more than zero. I want it to be somewhat consistent. But I also like the small talk sometimes, just like I like resting and sitting on the couch after going for a run. So it's something like that. Other point, circling back to my opening analogy about going back to high school, knowing everything you know now, as far as my social life, if I went back to high school knowing everything I know now, it's like I can connect with people. I can do a pretty good job in that environment for the most part. Some of the intricacies, some of the slang, some of the finer details of how to interact, they wouldn't quite be there. It wouldn't be a smooth experience necessarily, because I would feel like no one understood me, and I would feel quite different, even though I could still find some meaning and have some good interactions and get around. And then you end up feeling like a lot of time, like if you're wanting to put the effort into it, like I feel like I have the upper hand in knowing the social dynamics and kind of having a majority of the power in a lot of friendships, relationships, whatnot. And that's not necessarily a good thing. So, as I've thought about this video and typed everything out, another thing is to kind of show me how numbers oriented I am. Like, I want to be precise and use numbers to express everything here. Like, I'm 30% better than the average at this, 20% worse at that, blah, blah, blah. 70% of people do this, but numbers don't really work well here. At least I'm just clueless on what they actually are for a lot of these topics. So I guess where the main advantage is high likability, at least high ability to be likable, easily in touch with what's going on around me, able to get people to open up to me. And I guess being used to not having anyone super close. It might take a lot to make me really, really happy, especially socially, but it doesn't take a lot for me to be like just all right. So I feel like I could move anywhere, have and do all right socially, and find people, find interactions, and get by. There's not much that concerns me. There's not much I'm afraid of, So that's a big positive. And then with the quick learning ability, I'll add that I can typically be thoughtful of others' needs and recognize them without automatically prioritizing them. Like, I have a empathy, but it's not intrusive, and it's often controllable. Like, it doesn't take over me. It doesn't take over my decision making just because I realize someone's struggling. But I often do a good job, I would say, of realizing someone's struggling. So what are the disadvantages? One big thing would be the fact that some of this breakdown makes me sound like a sociopath. Maybe to some. Isolation, then, the fact there aren't many like me, and the fact there aren't a ton of people that are openly discussing the same things I am with the same viewpoints, and it's hard to know how many really feel similarly to me. A lack of charisma, lack of mental stimulation, those are the big downsides. The big difference is, like, it's just opposed to having a completely different life experience that impacts my relationship to information, and then kind of a somewhat unique social lifestyle and socialization as a kid as well. And the fact that a fairly important aspect of my life is quite masked. Plus the combination of liking being around others, but also being clunky, it's still having pretty good reads and perceptions in a social environment. But it's really hard to get a firm grasp on how large the differences actually are. That's all I have. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to comment, email me, whatever. Like and subscribe for more. More is coming. Peace.